Okay, let's read it a little bit more. After converting into Vaishnavas all the residents of Varanasi, who were headed by the sannyasis, and after completely educating and instructing Sanatana Goswami there, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to Jagannath Puri. All glories to Lord Chaitanya, all glories to Lord Nityananda, all glories to Advaita Chandra, and all glories to all the devotees of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Sri Sanatana Goswami in all the conclusions of devotional service for 2 consecutive months. For as long as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Varanasi, Paramananda Kirtaniya, who was a friend of Chandrasekhar's, chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and other songs to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a very humorous way. When the Mayavadi sannyasis at Varanasi criticized Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord's devotees became very much depressed. To satisfy them, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed his mercy to the sannyasis. In the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila, I have already elaborately described Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's deliverance of the sannyasis at Varanasi, but I shall briefly repeat it in this chapter. When the Mayavadi sannyasis were criticizing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu anywhere and everywhere in Varanasi, the Maharashtrian Brahmana, hearing this blasphemy, began to think about this unhappily. The Maharashtrian Brahmana thought, whoever closely sees the characteristics of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately realizes his personality and accepts him as the Supreme Lord. If by some means I can assemble all the sannyasis together, they will certainly become his devotees after seeing his personal characteristics. If one saw the personal characteristics and activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one would certainly be convinced that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can ascertain this by following in the footsteps of Shastric injunctions. This sincere study of appreciation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also applicable to his authorized devotees, and it is clearly stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Antyalila, Kali Ka Lera Dharma, Krishna Nam Sankirtan, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tar Pravartan. In this age of Kali, real religious propaganda should induce people to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. This is possible for someone who is especially empowered by Krishna. No one can do this without being especially favored by Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments in this regard in his Anubhashya, wherein he quotes a verse from the Narayana Samhita. In Dwapara Yuga, devotees of the Lord Vishnu and Krishna render devotional service according to the principle of Pancharatra. In this age of Kali, the Supreme Personality of God is worshipped simply by the chanting of his holy names. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur then comments, without being empowered by the direct potency of Lord Krishna to fulfill his desire, and without being specifically favored by the Lord, no human being can become the spiritual master of the whole world. He certainly cannot succeed by mental concoction, which is not meant for devotees or religious people. Only an empowered personality can distribute the holy name of the Lord and enjoin all fallen souls to worship Krishna. By distributing the holy name of the Lord, he cleanses the hearts of the most fallen people. Therefore, he extinguishes the blazing fire of the material world. Not only that, he broadcasts the shining brightness of Krishna's effulgence throughout the world. Such an acharya or spiritual master should be considered non-different from Krishna. That is, he should be considered the incarnation of Krishna's potency. Such a personality is Krishna Lingita Vigraha. Krishna Lingita Vigraha. That is, he is always embraced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Such a person is above the considerations of the Varnashrama institution. He is the guru or spiritual master for the entire world, a devotee on the topmost platform, the Mahabhagavata stage, and a Paramahamsa Thakur, a spiritual form only fit to be addressed as Paramahamsa or Thakur. Nonetheless, there are many people who are just like owls and never open their eyes to see the sunshine. These owlish personalities, who are inferior even to the Mayavadi sannyasis, cannot see the brilliance of Krishna's favor upon the Mahabhagavata devotee. They are prepared to criticize the person engaged in distributing the holy name all over the world and following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who wanted Krishna consciousness preached in every town and village. Indicative of the fact that if one gets success, then people are going to get envious and criticize. I shall have to reside at Varanasi the rest of my life. If I do not try to carry out this plan, I shall certainly continue to suffer mental depression. Thinking like this, the Maharashtrian Brahmana extended an invitation to all the sannyasis at Varanasi. After doing so, he finally approached Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to extend him an invitation. At this time, Chandrasekhar and Tapan Mishra both heard blasphemous criticism against Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and felt very unhappy. They came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet to submit a request. They submitted their request, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, seeing his devotees' unhappiness, decided to turn the minds of the Mayavadi sannyasis. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was seriously considering meeting with the Mayavadi sannyasis, the Maharashtrian Brahmana approached him and extended an invitation. The Brahmana submitted his invitation with great humility, and he touched the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted his invitation, and the next day, after finishing his noontime activities, he went to the Brahmana's house. I have already described Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's deliverance of the Mayavadi sannyasis in the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila, when I described the glories of the Panchatattva, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Prabhu, Gadadhar Prabhu, and Srivas. Since I have already described this incident very elaborately in the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila, I do not wish to increase the size of this book by giving another description. However, I shall try to include in this chapter whatever was not described there. Beginning from the day on which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed his mercy to the Mayavadi sannyasis, there were vivid discussions about this conversion among the inhabitants of Varanasi. Beginning from the day on which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed his mercy to the Mayavadi sannyasis, there were vivid discussions about this conversion among the inhabitants of Varanasi. Crowds of people came to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from that day on, and scholars of various scriptures discussed different subject matters with the Lord. When people came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to discuss the principles of various scriptures, the Lord defeated their false conclusions and established the predominance of devotional service to the Lord. With logic and argument, he very politely changed their minds. Purport. We have been spreading this Sankirtan movement in the Western countries, and in our recent tour of European cities like Rome, Geneva, Paris, and Frankfurt, many learned Christian scholars, priests, philosophers, and yogis came to see us. And by the grace of Krishna, they agreed that the Krishna consciousness movement, the Bhakti cult, offers the topmost conclusion. Following in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are trying to convince everyone that the devotional service of the Lord is enjoined in every scripture. If a person is religious, he must accept the supreme authority of the Lord, become his devotee, and try to love him. This is the real principle of religion. It does not matter whether one is a Christian, Muslim, or whatever. He simply must accept the sublime position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and render service unto him. It is not a question of being Christian, Muslim, or Hindu. One should be purely religious and freed from all these material designations. In this way, one can learn the art of devotional service. This argument appeals to all intelligent men, and consequently the Krishna consciousness movement is gaining ground throughout the world. Due to our solid logic and scientific presentation, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prediction that Krishna consciousness will spread to every town and village throughout the world is gradually being realized. As soon, Hari Hari. As soon as people received instructions from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they began to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Thus everyone laughed, chanted, and danced with the Lord. All the Mayavadi sannyasis offered their obeisances under Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and then began to discuss his movement, giving up their studies of Vedanta and Mayavad philosophy. One of the disciples of Prakashananda Saraswati, who was as learned as his guru, began to speak in that assembly, offering all respects to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan himself. When he explains the Vedanta Sutra, he does so very nicely. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the direct meaning of the Upanishads. When all learned scholars hear this, their minds and ears are satisfied. Giving up the direct meaning of the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, Shankaracharya imagines some other interpretation. All the interpretations of Shankaracharya are imaginary. Such imaginary interpretations are verbally accepted by learned scholars, but they do not appeal to their hearts. The words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are firm and convincing, and I accept them as true. In this age of Kali, one cannot be delivered from the material clutches simply by formally accepting the renounced order. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's explanation of the verse beginning Hare Nama is not only pleasing to the ear, but is strong factual evidence. In this age of Kali, one cannot attain liberation without taking to the devotional service of the Lord. In this age, even if one chants the holy name of Krishna imperfectly, he still attains liberation very easily. Shreshtam Bhaktim Udasute Vibho. My dear Lord, devotional service unto you is the only auspicious path. If one gives it up simply for speculative knowledge or the understanding that these living beings are spirit souls and the material world is false, he undergoes a great deal of trouble. He only gains troublesome and inauspicious activities. His actions are like beating a husk that is already devoid of rice. His labor becomes fruitless. O lotus-eyed one, those who think they are liberated in this life, but who are devoid of devotional service to you, are of impure intelligence. Although they accept severe austerities and penances and rise to the spiritual position, to impersonal Brahman realization, they fall down again because they neglect to worship your lotus feet. The word Brahman, the greatest, indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full in all six opulences. But if we take the one-sided impersonalist view, his fullness is diminished. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is originally the Supreme Person, and he expands himself impersonally through his potency, as the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4, Mayatatamidam sarvam. By me and my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. The potency of Krishna that is spread everywhere is impersonal, just as the sunlight is the impersonal expansion of the sun globe and the sun god. If we simply take one side of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his impersonal effulgence, that one side does not fully explain the absolute truth. Impersonal appreciation of the absolute truth is one-sided and incomplete. One should also accept the other side, the personal side. Bhagavan, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdite. One should not be satisfied simply by understanding the Brahman feature of the personality of Godhead. One must also know the Lord's personal feature. That is complete understanding of the absolute truth. The Vedas, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Puranas all describe the activities of the spiritual potency of the Lord. If one cannot accept the personal activities of the Lord, he jokes foolishly and gives an impersonal description. In the Vedic literatures, including the Puranas, there are full descriptions of the spiritual potency of Krishna. All the pastimes of the Lord are eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. just as the form of Krishna himself is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. Shakchit Ananda Vigraha. Unintelligent people with a poor fund of knowledge compare their temporary bodies to the spiritual body of Krishna, and by such foolishness they try to understand Krishna as one of them. Abhajananti ma mudha manushim tanam ashritam. The Bhagavad Gita points out that foolish people think of Krishna as one of them. Not understanding his spiritual potency, they simply decry the personal form of the absolute truth, foolishly thinking of themselves as jnanis, cognizant of the complete truth. They cannot understand that just as the material energy of the Lord has a variety of activities, the spiritual energy has variety also. They consider activities in devotional service the same as activities in material consciousness. Under such a wrong impression, they sometimes dare joke about the spiritual activities of the Lord and his devotional service. The Mayavadis do not recognize the personal form of the Lord as spiritual and full of bliss. This is a great sin. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's statements are actually factual. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement especially aims at defeating the Mayavad conclusion about the Absolute Truth. Since the members of the Mayavad school cannot understand the spiritual form of the Lord, they incorrectly think of the Lord's form, that the Lord's form is also made of material energy. They think that he is covered by a material body, just like other living beings. Due to this offensive understanding, they cannot recognize that Sri Krishna's personal form is transcendental, not material. Their conclusion is a great offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. As explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna has his eternal, blissful form that is full of knowledge. And all Vaishnava acharyas accept this. That is the proper understanding of the absolute truth. O Supreme One, the transcendental form I am now seeing is full of transcendental bliss. It is not contaminated by the external energy. It is full of effulgence. My Lord, there is no better understanding of you than this. You are the Supreme Soul and the creator of this material world, but you are not connected with this material world. You are completely different from created form and variety. I sincerely take shelter of that form of yours, which I am now seeing. This form is the original source of all living beings and their senses. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 3.9.3. This verse was spoken by Lord Brahma, who perfectly realized the Supreme Personality of Godhead after meditating upon the Lord within the water of the Garbhodak ocean. Brahma realized that the form of the Lord is completely spiritual. This is certainly a better understanding of the absolute truth than the impersonal understanding. Lord Sri Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of all causes. He is past, present, and future, and he is the movable and immovable. He is the greatest and the smallest, and he is visible and directly experienced. He is celebrated in the Vedic literature. Everything is Krishna, and without him there is no existence. He is the root of all understanding, and he is that which is understood by all words. By all words. This is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:43, that was spoken by Uddhava when he came to pacify all the inhabitants of Vrindavan during Krishna's absence. O most auspicious one, for our benefit you enable our worship of you by manifesting your transcendental form, which you show to us in our meditation. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Person, and we worship you, whom impersonalists do not accept due to their poor fund of knowledge. Thus they are liable to descend into a hellish condition. That means if you don't have the conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're liable to descend into a hellish condition. Fools disrespect me because I appear like a human being. This is the whole chapter about the importance of personalism. It's a nice way to end the Madhya Lila, isn't it? Fools disrespect me because I appear like a human being. They do not know my supreme position as the cause of all causes, the creator of the material energy. So everyone wants to avoid the subject. And if you try to name an individual god, they're like, well, what about other gods? What about other ideas? Why not something else? To which Prabhupada said, okay, give us something else. Tell us what you think. Like, well, we don't have anything. So then take this. He said that to Yogi Bhajan, who was going round and round and say, yeah, but other people have an idea. What is their idea? Tell me what their idea is and we'll accept. Well, he equivocated from it. Then take this. Those who are envious of my form, who are cruel and mischievous, and the lowest among men, are perpetually cast by me into hellish existence and various demoniac species of life. Not accepting the transformation of energy, Sripad Shankaracharya has tried to establish the theory of illusion under the plea that Vyasadeva has made a mistake. For an explanation of this verse, one may refer to Adi Lila, chapter 7, verses 121 through 126. Sripad Shankaracharya has given his interpretation an imaginary meaning. It does not actually appeal to the mind of any sane man. He has done this to convince the atheists and bring them under his control. Sripad Shankaracharya's propaganda opposed the atheistic philosophy of Buddha. Lord Buddha's intention was to stop atheists from committing the sin of killing animals. Atheists cannot understand God. Therefore, Lord Buddha appeared and spread the philosophy of non-violence to keep the atheists from killing animals. Unless one is free from the sin of animal killing, he cannot understand religion or God. Although Lord Buddha was an incarnation of Krishna, he did not speak about God, for the people were unable to understand. He simply wanted to stop animal killing. Sripad Shankaracharya wanted to establish the predominance of one's spiritual identity. Therefore, he wanted to convert the atheists through an imaginary interpretation of the Vedic literatures. These are the secrets of the Acharyas. Sometimes they conceal the real purpose of the Vedas and explain the Vedas in a different way. Sometimes they enunciate a different theory just to bring the atheists under their control. Thus it is said that Shankara's philosophy is for Pashandas, atheists. The atheists, headed by the Mayavadi philosophers, do not care for liberation or Krishna's mercy. They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter-theories to atheistic philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. That sentence I don't understand. How can you can put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheistic philosophy? They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter theories. Okay. And not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. The conclusion is that the import of the Vedanta Sutra is covered by the imaginary explanation of Shankaracharya. Whatever Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said is perfectly true. Whatever meaning Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives is perfect. Any other interpretation is only a distortion. After saying this, the disciple of Prakashananda Saraswati began to chant the holy name of Krishna. Hearing this, Prakashananda Saraswati made the following statement. Prakashananda Saraswati said, Shankaracharya was very eager to establish the philosophy of monism. Therefore, he explained the Vedanta Sutra or Vedanta philosophy in a different way to support monistic philosophy. If one accepts the personality of Godhead, the philosophy that maintains that God and the living entity are one cannot be established. Therefore, Shankaracharya argued against and refuted all kinds of revealed scriptures. Anyone who wants to establish his own opinion or philosophy certainly cannot explain any scripture according to the principle of direct interpretation. The Mimamsaka philosophers conclude that if there is a God, he is subject to our fruitive activities. Similarly, the Sankhya philosophers, who analyze the cosmic manifestation, say that the cause of the cosmos is material nature. The followers of Nyaya, the philosophy of logic, maintain that the atom is the cause of the cosmic manifestation, and the Mayavadi philosophers maintain that the impersonal Brahman effulgence is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. The Patanjala philosophers say that when one is self-realized, he understands the Lord. Similarly, according to the Vedas and Vedic principles, the original cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After studying the 6 philosophical theses, Vyasadeva completely summarized them all in the aphorisms of Vedanta philosophy. According to Vedanta philosophy, the absolute truth is a person. When the word nirguna, without qualities, is used, it is to be understood that the Lord has attributes that are totally spiritual. Of the philosophers mentioned, none really cares for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. They are always busy refuting the philosophical theories of others and establishing their own. By studying the 6 philosophical theories, one cannot reach the absolute truth. It is therefore our duty, to follow the path of the Mahajans, the authorities. Whatever they say should be accepted as the absolute truth. I'll take a few reflections or questions. Three, 2, 1. Okay, there's one in the back.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. This Brahmana who he was afraid of being depressed for the rest of his life if he didn't arrange for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meeting the sannyasis. So could that be compared with if we don't arrange for the book distribution?
Yeah.
We will be depressed, or should, because who can defeat them like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu other than Prabhupada?
Well, it's like the old saying, if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. And if you're at a boring place, then restart the Sankirtan movement there. And yeah, such a nice point. He was in that place, so he didn't want to be stuck with a bunch of Mayavadis. So he put him on to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who changed everybody. Right? Yes, Rajaras Bhavana.
I was reflecting on Shankara's the history of Shankaracharya's explanations, because especially after Krishna left, the history of Indian religions has been very interesting, because it really started off with the exploitation of the Brahmana class, and they were exploiting all the other orders of society, and with animal killing and so on, more violence increased. And as a response to make something more liberal, Jainism and Buddhism came in, because their main principle was nonviolence, and that was very attractive to people at that time, especially those oppressed by the Brahmanas. And after that, Shankaracharya over here, with Buddhism, there's no sense of self. Jainism has a little sense of self, but like you're at war with yourself. And so Shankaracharya almost like filled that gap and brought in this idea that the self is wonderful, it's great, it's as good as God. And then what we see over here is Mahaprabhu very directly, and even till the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Prabhupada, aiming to defeat that monistic philosophy where the self or these individual jivas are God, and this idea of merging and so on. From what I've noticed now, though, is that at least in the West, there are some if one speculates for a very long time, they can reach Mayavad philosophy, but the average person on the street maybe is not so concerned with the idea of merging or being God themselves. What do you feel like is the new thing that we need to defeat? And then what are the best ways of, with logic and argument, to respond to those?
Well, Prabhupada was especially keen on defeating atheistic science. And as you know, I'm keen on that. People aren't very philosophical or very scientific. Even scientists aren't. We've been talking to a few lately. And in any case, the people in general just have a basic understanding of erroneous scientific theories. And I feel that what we need, what would be most helpful for them is to have a way to question those theories and think for themselves. Like you made that presentation about the Big Bang, and the way you presented it was to take people through the history of the theory itself and see how flimsy the evidence is and how it's all held together with rubber bands and Scotch tape and a few pieces of thread found here and there. And when people come to question materialistic scientists and the theories that are accepted a priori these days, for instance, if you read any self-help book, guaranteed could be in the first chapter, but at least the second chapter by the third page, somebody's going to say, as everybody knows, we evolved into this. That concept's going to come in, and that we started in a primitive state or as matter, and now somehow we've evolved into humans, and this is a phenomena, whatever they're describing is a result of this evolution, and whatever primal instincts we still have came from a time when we were less evolved. And to be able to have a team of young people who are endowed with sattva-gun and above average intelligences and access to sound arguments in order to untie people's attachments to science. Not to disparage science outright, but just to take individual points and help people question them so they can open their minds to another epistemology that can guide them in their lives, rather than just accepting what modern science says. I think that Dhruta Karma's approach is fantastic, because in Forbidden Archaeology, he basically just shows people what's going on behind the curtain in academia. That people cheat all over the place, and they're self-motivated, and they try to hold the levers of power through academia and control what information gets out there. And you don't have to make anything up, you just have to show that human nature has entered into the academy, and that's what everybody believes in, because that's what gets into the textbooks for lower education, but to speak of higher education. And so that's where I think we need to we have to take a systematic approach and bring presentations that are understandable to the common person on the street, where they can take those and then say, aha, maybe there is another way. And a lot of scientists are thinking that way nowadays. They're talking about how consciousness can't be measured in the same way that we've thought we could measure the material nature, and to some degree we can through controlled experiments, but you can't control consciousness in the same way. So that's one place I think that we could contribute to the conversation that's going on amongst people who are unaware of Mayavad, but they're much more aware of and have faith in science. They don't even know what Mayavad is. What do you think, Brajras Baba? Let's hear your response to that, because you have some experience in this field.
I think you put it really well, like atheistic science, to some regard, where those that are that believe in the scientific process more than anyone should, and questioning that is a very sound technique that's worked for a lot of other devotees, and also works when introducing new theories in science itself without being aggressive, is definitely an attractive way to promote Krishna consciousness.
Thanks, Brajras Baba. Important question. We have Devavrata, and then I'm going to Namachintamani. Or whoever starts. Oh, it's Nitya Tarangani, sorry.
Just following up on that point, what I'm seeing nowadays is that due to the effect of atheistic science within education, there is a practical sociological response in terms of the roles people play in society. And amongst the newest generation, the young generation, one of the biggest topics of concern is gender roles. And there's a huge trend in America of people speaking about traditional roles. And Prabhupada has a lot to say on the organization of society and the roles which people play in society. Do you think this could potentially be another pain point or entry point, and something which devotees could contribute to and enliven the discussion and potentially provide a means of improving people's overall sense of
Definitely,
value?
because the conversation about gender roles is somewhat amorphous, because the whole idea of gender being fluid, and of course we always have the story in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. But yes, I think it is an area where if we bring some clarity, and it's done with a lot of foresight and preparation, and we hit the right points, it could give relief to people, because they get really confused by the conversation and they don't get very far. And you can see conservatives, Christian type people who bring up traditional roles and are able in many ways to hold their own in some circumstances, to show that it's not just old-fashioned, there is some value in it. And so if we were able to position ourselves to present that in a reasonable way, not a fanatical way, with sociological evidence, and appeal to people's sense of wanting to feel natural in their lives, then I think that would be a good area also. Okay, Nitya Tarangani?
There is one online question. It's from Chaitanya. He's
Chaitanya Nityanam?
I think so.
Okay.
He's saying, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, is it a correct understanding of verse 43 that Mayavadis try to counter atheism but end up propagating a form of atheism through their impersonalist philosophy, which lacks any real spiritual engagement?
Yeah, I stopped on that verse. The atheists, headed by the Mayavadi philosophers, do not care for liberation or Krishna's mercy. They simply continue to put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheistic philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. And what was his question?
Is it a correct understanding of verse 43 that Mayavadis try to counter atheism but end up propagating a form of atheism through their impersonalist philosophy, which lacks any real spiritual engagement?
They simply put forward false arguments and counter theories to atheistic philosophy, not considering or engaging in spiritual matters. Yeah, I suppose that's a viable interpretation, because the Mayavadis, we call them atheistic, but they don't call themselves atheistic. They think they're theists because, after all, they're God and everybody else is too. So there is a conception of theism there. It's our nomenclature where we say these guys are atheists. So that's probably why I got thrown off the track here. But I think you could interpret it that way, and Mahendra Prabhu has some insight.
I think this refers the counter-theories to atheistic. The counter-theories to atheistic philosophies refers to their arguments against Buddhism and other who are considered traditional.
They're arguing amongst themselves, all the atheistic philosophers are. Or they're arguing against
the Mayavadis put forward their engagement against Buddhism and other Nastika philosophies. There are many others also, like Charvaka and others. So they defeat them, but ultimately because they reject the.
Because they're going nowhere fast themselves, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you. That's helpful. Okay. Oh yes, Nirakula Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna. I was reminded of the theme that runs through the Chaitanya Charitamrita when we heard about the Mahari stream Brahmin feeling compassion for the Mayavadi sannyasis and wanted to make an arrangement for them to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and be saved. Because going back to Adi Leela, when Lord Chaitanya was manifesting his pastimes as an Nimai, a brilliant and kind of arrogant scholar, all of the devotees would meet him, or when they knew of him, they would be praying that if only he could take to Krishna consciousness, if only he'd worship Krishna, and they would give him blessings like that. And since Lord Chaitanya is manifesting the pastime of a devotee, he showed even in his incarnation that he took the blessings of devotees in many circumstances, and it runs throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita that we're dependent on the blessings and good wishes and support of the devotees.
Well, thanks. That's a astute observation, and one that we can a benefit, an asset we can aspire to. Right? Okay. Is everyone okay? You don't mind fasting to death? Okay. I'm going to read it just a little bit more to keep us on track. In his Amrita Prabha Bhashya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives the following summary of the 6 philosophical processes. Prakashananda admitted that Sripad Shankaracharya, being very eager to establish his philosophy as monism, took shelter of the Vedanta philosophy and tried to explain it in his own way. The fact is, however, that if one accepts the existence of God, one certainly cannot establish the theory of monism. For this reason, Shankaracharya refuted all kinds of Vedic literature that establishes the supremacy of the personality of Godhead. In various ways, Shankaracharya has tried to refute the Vedic literature. Throughout the world, 99% of the philosophers follow in the footsteps of Shankaracharya's refuse to accept. Is that what it says? Refuse? They refuse, sorry. Throughout the world, 99% of the philosophers following in the footsteps of Shankaracharya refuse to accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead, they try to establish their own opinions. It is typical of mundane philosophers to want to establish their own opinions and refute those of others. Therefore, 1, the Mimamsaka philosophers following the principles of Jaimini stress fruitive activity and say that if there is a God, he must be under the laws of fruitive activity. In other words, if one performs his duties very nicely in the material world, God is obliged to give one the desired result. According to these philosophers, there is no need to become a devotee of God. If one strictly follows moral principles, one will be recognized by the Lord, who will give the desired reward. Such philosophers do not accept the Vedic principle of bhakti yoga. Instead, they give stress to following one's prescribed duty. 2. Atheistic Sankhya philosophers like Kapila analyze the material elements very scrutinizingly and thereby come to the conclusion that material nature is the cause of everything. They do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the cause of all causes. 3. Nyaya philosophers like Gautama and Kanada have accepted a combination of atoms as the original cause of creation. 4. Mayavadi philosophers say that everything is an illusion, headed by philosophers like Ashtavakra. They stress the impersonal Brahman effulgence as the cause of everything. 5. Philosophers following the precepts of Patanjali practice yoga, Raj Yoga. They imagine a form of the absolute truth within many forms. That is their process of self-realization. All 5 of these philosophies completely reject the predominance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and strive to establish their own philosophical theories. However, Srila Vyasadeva wrote the Vedanta Sutra and, taking the essence of all Vedic literature, established the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All 5 kinds of philosophers mentioned above understand that impersonal Brahman is without material qualities, and they believe that when the Personality of Godhead appears, he is contaminated and covered by the material qualities. The technical term used is saguna. They speak of saguna Brahman and nirguna Brahman. For them, nirguna Brahman means the impersonal absolute truth without any material qualities. And saguna Brahman means the absolute truth that accepts the contamination of material qualities. More or less, this kind of philosophical speculation is called Mayavad philosophy. The fact is, however, that the absolute truth never has anything to do with material qualities because he is transcendental. He is always complete with full spiritual qualities. The 5 philosophers mentioned above do not accept Lord Vishnu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they are very busy refuting the philosophies of other schools. There are 6 kinds of philosophical processes in India. Because Vyasadeva is the Vedic authority, he is known as Vedavyas. His philosophical explanation of the Vedanta Sutra is accepted by the devotees. As Krishna confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. The ultimate goal of studying all Vedic literature is the acceptance of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Krishna consciousness movement is propagating the philosophical conclusion of Srila Vyasadeva and following other great acharyas like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What a perfect essay to defeat these Mayavad philosophies. So they're all more or less, he said, Mayavad. Tarko pratishta shutayo vibhinna. Dry arguments are inconclusive. A great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Consequently, as the Shastras confirm, one should accept whatever progressive path the Mahajans advocate. Mahabharata. The words of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are a shower of nectar. Whatever he concludes to be the ultimate truth is indeed the summum bonum of all spiritual knowledge. After hearing all these statements, the Maharashtrian Brahmin very jubilantly went to inform Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When the Maharashtrian Brahmin went to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord was going to the temple of Bindu Madhava, after bathing in the waters of the Pancha Nada. While the Lord was on his way, the Maharashtrian Brahmana informed him about the incident that took place in the camp of Prakashananda Saraswati. Hearing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiled happily. Upon reaching the temple of Bindu Madhava, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, seeing the beauty of Lord Bindu Madhava, became overwhelmed in ecstatic love. He then began to dance in the courtyard of the temple. There were 4 people accompanying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and these were Chandrasekhar, Paramananda Puri, Tapana Mishra, and Sanatan Goswami. They were all chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in the following way. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. They were chanting the Hare Krishna mantra in the following way. They chanted Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. This is another way of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The meaning is as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He is the descendant of the Yadu family. Let me offer my respectful obeisance unto Gopal, Govinda, Ram, and Madhusudana. Haraye Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha. Is that 19? Haraye Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha. 14. Gopala Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudana. That's 13. Gopala Govinda Rama Sri Madhusudana. Thank you. 14 and 14. How's that going to work out for writing matching to tunes? Because we have 16 with Hare Krishna mantra. Is it going to mess us up or not? You got to hold something longer? Like the Hare. Okay, you sing it, I'll play it. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan. No harm, right? Gopal Govinda Ram Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Oh wait, I'm doing it wrong. Go. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. It's another way of chanting Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. I heard, somebody told me the other day that in his book, Satyaraj, that he wrote about Kirtan, said that there were 4 phrases that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mostly chanted. So one's Hare Krishna mantra, the other one's this. What are the other 2? Ooh, I like that. Then what else? What's the 4th? Actually, Prabhupada, when he introduced Hari Bol, he said it's a shortcut to chanting Hare Krishna. But he didn't like us chanting it. In Mayapur, 1975, devotees had this fad going where they chant Hari Bol for 5, 10, 20 minutes, just over and over again. Haribol, 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 and Prabhupada stopped it. Well, anyways, this is another way of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The meaning is as follows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. He is a descendant of the Yadu family. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto Gopal, Govinda Ram, and Sri Madhusudan. In all directions, hundreds of thousands of people began to chant, Hare, Hare. Thus there arose a tumultuous and auspicious sound that filled the entire universe. We scared somebody. When Prakashananda Saraswati, who was staying nearby, heard this tumultuous chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, he and his disciples immediately came to see the Lord. When Prakashananda Saraswati saw the Lord, he and his disciples also joined the chanting with Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prakashananda Saraswati was charmed by the Lord's dancing in ecstatic love and by the transcendental beauty of his body. Ecstatic spiritual transformations began to take place in the Lord's body. His body trembled and his voice faltered. He perspired, turned pale, and wept a constant flow of tears, which wet all the people standing there. The eruptions on the Lord's body appeared like kadamba flowers. All the people were astonished to see the Lord's jubilation and humility and to hear him talk in ecstasy. Indeed, all the residents of Benares, Kashi, saw the bodily transformations and were astonished. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu regained his external consciousness, he saw that many Mayavadi sannyasis and other people were gathered there. He therefore suspended his dancing for the time being. After stopping the kirtan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is a great example of humility, offered prayers unto the feet of Prakashananda Saraswati. At this, Prakashananda Saraswati immediately came forward and clasped the Lord's lotus feet. When Prakashananda Saraswati caught hold of the Lord's lotus feet, the Lord said, "My dear sir, you are the spiritual master of the whole world. Therefore, you are most worshipable. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not even on the level of the disciple of your disciple." Mayavadi sannyasis generally call themselves Jagat Guru, the spiritual master of the whole world. Many consider themselves worshipable by everyone, although they do not even go outside India or their own district. Out of his great magnanimity and humility, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu presented himself as a subordinate disciple of Prakashananda Saraswati. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, "You are a great spiritually advanced personality, and therefore you cannot worship a person like me. I am far inferior. If you do so, my spiritual power will be diminished, for you as good as the impersonal Brahman. My dear sir, for you, everyone is on the level of impersonal Brahman, but for the enlightenment of people in general, you should not behave in that way." Prakashananda Saraswati replied, "Formerly I committed many offenses against you by blaspheming you, but now the effects of my offenses are counteracted by my touching your lotus feet. If a person considered liberated in this life commits offenses against the reservoir of inconceivable potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he will again fall down and desire the material atmosphere for material enjoyment." Being touched by the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, that serpent was immediately freed from the reactions of his sinful life. Thus the serpent gave up his body and assumed the body of a beautiful Vidyadhara demigod. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:34-9. The inhabitants of Vrindavan, under the leadership of Nanda Maharaj, once went to the bank of the Saraswati on a pilgrimage. Nanda Maharaj was fasting, and he lay down near the forest. At that time, a serpent who was formerly cursed by Angirasa Rishi appeared. This serpent had formerly been named Sudarshana, and he had belonged to the Gandharva Loka planet. However, because he joked with the rishi, he was condemned to take on the body of a big snake. When the serpent attacked Nanda Maharaj began to call, "Krishna, help! Krishna." Oh, you want to do it? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Krishna, help! Krishna immediately appeared and began to kick the serpent with his lotus foot. Due to being touched by the Lord's lotus feet, the serpent was immediately freed from the reactions of his sinful life. Being freed, he again assumed his original form of Sudarshan, the Gandharva. When Prakashananda Saraswati supported himself by quoting the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately protested by uttering the holy name of Lord Vishnu. The Lord then presented himself as a most fallen living entity. And he said, if someone accepts a fallen conditioned soul as Vishnu, Bhagavan, or an incarnation, he commits a great offense. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to teach us a lesson, he nonetheless denied belonging to the Vishnu category. Unfortunately, there are many so-called Vishnu incarnations in this age of Kali. People do not know that posing oneself as an incarnation is most offensive. People should not accept an ordinary man as an incarnation of God, for this also is a very great offense. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued to say nothing of ordinary living entities. Even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva cannot be considered on the level of Vishnu or Narayan. If one considers them as such, he is immediately considered an offender and an atheist. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudradidaivatai Samatvenaiva Viksheta Sapashandi Bhavedruvam. A person who considers demigods like Brahma and Shiva to be on an equal level with Narayan is to be considered an offender, a Pashandi. Prakashananda replied, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. Nonetheless, you are considering yourself as eternal servant. My dear Lord, you are the Supreme Lord, and although you consider yourself the Lord's servant, you are nonetheless worshipable. You are much greater than I am. Therefore, all my spiritual achievements have been lost because I have blasphemed you. Muktanam apisiddhanam narayana parayana sadulabha prashantatma koti shvapi mahamune. O great sage, out of many millions of materially liberated people who are free from ignorance, and out of many millions of siddhas who have nearly attained perfection, there is hardly one pure devotee of Narayan. Only such a devotee is actually completely satisfied and peaceful. Srimad Bhagavatam 6th Canto. When a person mistreats great souls, his lifespan, opulence, reputation, religion, possessions, and good fortune are all destroyed. This statement, Srimad Bhagavatam 10.4.46, was made by Shukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. Naisham vatista vadarukramangrim sprishatyanartha pagamo yadartha mahiya sampada rajobhishekam niskinchananam navranita yavad. Unless human society accepts the dust of the lotus feet of great Mahatmas, devotees who have nothing to do with material possessions, mankind cannot turn its attention to the lotus feet of Krishna. Those lotus feet vanquish all the unwanted, miserable conditions of material life. Bhagavatam 7th Canto. Henceforward I shall certainly develop devotional service unto your lotus feet. For this reason I have come to you and have fallen down at your lotus feet. After saying this, Prakashananda Saraswati sat down with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and began to question the Lord as follows. Prakashananda Saraswati said, we can understand the faults you have pointed out in the Mayavad philosophy. All the explanations given by Shankaracharya are imaginary. My dear Lord, whatever direct meaning you have given when explaining the Brahma Sutra is certainly very wonderful to all of us. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore you have inconceivable energies. I wish to hear from you briefly about the Brahma Sutra. Prakashananda Saraswati said that he had already understood Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's explanation of the direct import of the Brahma Sutra. Nonetheless, he was requesting the Lord to now briefly give the purport of the Brahma Sutra, the Vedanta Sutra. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, "I'm an ordinary living being, and therefore my knowledge is very insignificant. However, the meaning of the Brahma Sutra is very grave because its author, Vyasadeva, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. An ordinary living being cannot actually understand the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra. One can understand the meaning if he hears it from the authority, Vyasadeva himself. For this purpose, Vyasadeva gave a commentary on the Brahma Sutra in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. He had been instructed to do this by his spiritual master Narada. Of course, Shankaracharya distorted the meaning of the Brahma Sutra because he had a motive to serve. He wanted to establish Vedic knowledge in place of the atheistic knowledge spread by Lord Buddha. All these necessities are there according to time and circumstances. Neither Lord Buddha nor Shankaracharya is to be blamed. The time required such an explanation for the understanding of various types of atheists. The conclusion is that one cannot understand the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra without going through Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering devotional service. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore further explains the matter in the following verses. The purport of the Vedanta Sutra is very difficult for an ordinary person to understand, but Vyasadeva, out of his causeless mercy, has personally explained the meaning. If the Vedanta Sutra is explained by Vyasadeva himself, who has written it? Its original meaning can be understood by the people in general. The meaning of the sound vibration Omkar is present in the Gayatri Mantra. The same is elaborately explained in the 4 shlokas of Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Chatu Shloki. Whatever was spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to Lord Brahma in those 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam was also explained to Narada by Lord Brahma. Whatever Lord Brahma told Narada Muni was again explained by Narada Muni to Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva later considered these instructions in his mind. Srila Vyasadeva considered that whatever he had received from Narada Muni as an explanation of Omkar, he would elaborately explain in his book, Srimad Bhagavatam, as a commentary on the Brahma Sutra. The sound vibration Omkar is the root of Vedic knowledge. Omkar is known as the Mahavakya, or Supreme Sound. Whatever meaning is in the Supreme Sound Omkar is further understood in the Gayatri Mantra. Again, this same meaning is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 4 shlokas, known as the Chatu Shloki, which begin with the words, Aham evasam eva agre. The Lord says, only I existed before the creation. From this statement, 4 shlokas have been composed, and these are known as the Chatur Shloki. In this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead informed Lord Brahma about the purport of the Chatur Shloki. Again, Lord Brahma explained this to Narada Muni, and Narada Muni explained it to Srila Vyasadeva. This is the Parampara system, the disciplic succession. The import of Vedic knowledge, the original word pranava, has been explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The conclusion is that the Brahma Sutra is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva collected whatever Vedic conclusions were in the 4 Vedas and 108 Upanishads and placed them in the aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra. In the Vedanta Sutra, the purport of all Vedic knowledge is explained. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, the same purport has been explained in 18,000 verses. Therefore, it is to be concluded that the Brahma Sutra is explained vividly in Srimad Bhagavatam. Also, what is explained in the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam has the same purport as what is explained in the Upanishads. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself that are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam, believe it or not, 8.1.10. Communists and socialists are trying to propagate the philosophy that everything belongs to the mass of people or to the state. Such an idea is not perfect. When this idea is expanded, we can see that everything belongs to God. That will be the perfection of the communistic idea. The purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam is here very nicely explained. Every one of us must be satisfied with those things the Supreme Personality of God has allotted us. We should not encroach upon the possessions of others. This simple idea can be expanded in our daily lives. Everyone should have a piece of land given by the government, and everyone should possess a few cows. Both of these should be utilized for one's daily bread. Above that, if something is manufactured in a factory, it should be considered the property of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the ingredients belong to the Supreme Lord. Actually, there is no need to manufacture such things artificially. But if it is done, one should consider that the goods produced belong to the Supreme Lord. Spiritual communism recognizes the supreme proprietorship of the Supreme Lord, as the Lord explains in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. A person in full consciousness, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor of and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. It is further explained in Srimad Bhagavatam that no one should claim anything as his property. Whatever property one claims to be his actually belongs to Krishna. One should be satisfied with whatever has been allotted by the Supreme Lord, and should not encroach upon the property of others. This will lead to peace in the whole world. The essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, our relationship with the Supreme Lord, our activities in that connection, and the goal of life is manifest in the 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Chatur Shloki. Everything is explained in those verses. Lord Krishna says, I am the center of all relationships. Knowledge of me and practical application of that knowledge is actual knowledge. Approaching me for devotional service is called abhideya. Purport: spiritual knowledge means fully understanding the absolute truth in 3 features: impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and the all-powerful Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ultimately, when he takes shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages in the Lord's service, the resultant knowledge is called vijnana, special knowledge, or the practical application of spiritual knowledge. One should be engaged in the Lord's devotional service to achieve the aim of life, called prayojan. The practice of devotional service to attain that goal is called abhideya. By rendering devotional service, one gradually rises to the platform of love of Godhead. That is the chief goal of life. On the platform of love of Godhead, one is eternally engaged in the service of the Lord. We'll just take the last few couple reflections or questions. Yay! Mukharvin's still here.
Maharaj, one thing I noticed that Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has included the section of Prakasanand Saraswati knowledge in the very early in Adi Lila, rather than it comes in chronologically in this Madhya Lila. So there was any specific reason that he included that the whole discussion in Adi Lila?
Well, one of the patterns we've noticed is that he summarizes really important parts in the beginning of sections of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and then expands on them later. And this is obviously a really important section because of the surrender of Prakashananda Saraswati. In the face of Mayavadism being so prevalent, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing the bhakti doctrine, it's worth repeating and expanding upon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ekachakra, and then we're going to the outside people's party.
I was just remembering the story of Nagari when it was described that a Vaishnav can be measured by how many other Vaishnavas he makes, and this idea of a touchstone, a stone that can turn things to gold. And I was thinking a touchstone as a Vaishnav, you're actually making other touchstones, which is even beyond a touchstone. So, like Prabhupada made Vaishnavas who are now making other Vaishnavas. And I was thinking if I had a touchstone, I'd want to turn everything into gold. So the best thing a Vaishnav can do if they receive this mercy and this power is to go out and meet as many people as possible. And even just 1/11th of a second, as we learned earlier on, is enough to guarantee success in that person's life. So I'm really appreciating all the book distributors and all the devotees who their main goal is just to go out and contact as many people as possible to pass this onward.
Palo. Outside people's party? I love that. Touchstones making other touchstones. What could be better than that? Achinta Chaitanya Prabhu.
Just when Ekachakra Prabhu made this point, it just occurred in my mind that Srila Prabhupada in his preface to the Bhagavad Gita writes that if this whole endeavor results in one person being a pure devotee, then I would consider the whole thing to be successful. So similarly, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to use the analogy of the point is to take the harvest home. So he would refer to the plants in the field and say that unless they're protected, they can be destroyed by incoming animals or different things, pests and things like that. So, it just occurred to me that this whole thing that you're doing here in Govardhana, this process of reading and everybody assembled together, it's a very important aspect of what Srila Prabhupada wanted in the Krishna consciousness movement, which is to boil the milk. Because our success is not measured by how many people we made chant Hare Krishna, but rather our success is measured by how many people we actually made to go back to Godhead. Because Prabhupada himself defines it like that. If the whole endeavor, one person becomes a pure devotee, then I would consider it to be successful. Thank you.
Bhalo. Are you all feeling boiled? Cooked down. When you go back home, everyone's like, wow, you're really sweet now. Anyone else in the outside people's party? Yes, Brajras Bhavana.
I was reflecting on this point that came up in the previous chapter, I think, where it was said that the Mayavadis are still attracted to Krishna's pastimes. And I was thinking about the Jagannath Puri Pujaris, where they're all part of the Shankara Mutt, but they can't stop thinking of Jagannath and all his pastimes.
Yeah. There's also a verse we came across a few times that says the Mayavadis establish a deity of Radha and Krishna in the Brahman, and they worship that. And it's indicative of the natural inclination of every living entity to want vilas, then to be part of that relationship. And even to achieve success in Mayavad, they have this sense of have to worship the energetic and the energy. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Panchatam. What? There's more. Sorry. It's off screen.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
How do we understand when it's appropriate to preach to Mayavadis and atheists or Buddhists, for example, and when it's not? Because in my experience, I experienced once, there was a very successful kirtan led by ISKCON devotees, and even Buddhists started dancing. and everybody was enthused and very happy. But other times, preaching to Mayavadis was very detrimental because they really were not listening, and yeah, the whole situation wasn't inspiring at all.
Oh, yeah, that can be really tough. Well, it's like when you go to pick fruits off a tree. You have to learn when they're ripe. As for myself, I'm a connoisseur of avocados, and I could see an avocado across the room and tell if it's ripe or not. Because I don't think I've gone a day in my life without having an avocado. And we're enjoined by the Bhagavatam to be on the lookout for those who are ripe. And so there may be people who are influenced by Mayavad, but they're not so dedicated to it that they want to argue about it. But it's what Prabhupada called the great art, for instance, the great art of book distribution. It includes learning how to find the right fruits and then pick them. I mean, that's continuing the metaphor. Nothing else would have worked well. And then sometimes devotees become so expert that they are able to find a fruit that's barely ripe, but somehow they still pick it and it ripens off the vine when they bring it home. I've seen people who are Buddhists. There was a professor who's now a Vaishnava in Colorado, and he had appreciated the devotees coming there and giving programs. He was a religious history professor and also a follower of the Dalai Lama. And he made the mistake of helping the devotees out and cohorting with them. And they gave him Prabhupada's books, which he read because he's a scholar. But he still maintained his idea of Buddhism and there was no soul, anatma. But gradually, he changed his mind. He became a Vaishnava. You want to know the moment he became a Vaishnava? He read the Bhagavatam twice. He read the Chaitanya Charitamrita at least once, and many other books, Bhagavad Gita. I mean, he was an avid reader and studier, but he still didn't change. And then he read Vishaka Devi's book about the Bhagavad Gita and related to nature. I forget what it's called, but there are vignettes in which she looks at nature and relates it to the Bhagavad Gita. And he read that book, and he told me the very moment he changed his mind, he came to a vignette there talking about the soul. And he said, okay, that's it, I'm a Vaishnava. And he wrote the Dalai Lama, because he was close to him, and asked him if he could switch horses. And he gave his blessings and became a devotee. So we don't know, but one thing is, if people are inimical and pushing back, then it's not our duty, or it is our duty to not be engaged with them. But I just have one other anecdote, which I've told many times because it was so surprising, and it was on Santa Cruz, a town a little south of where our temple is. I used to go there a lot for book distribution on the street. We were with a few devotees, and I had one witness to this who was total eyewitness there the whole time, Shraddha Devi Dasi, and she was watching me distribute. And I met this guy with his daughter. His daughter was probably 8 or something like that. And the guy was a Mr. Know-It-All. And he was telling his daughter, yeah, I know who these people are and this is what they do. And it's like, I showed him the book and he's looking at it. And he goes, okay, fine, this is really good. And then I said, and we don't sell them like in a bookstore. We just take a donation. You take it back. You're like all the other people. You're the same as all the other hustlers in the world. And he went on for about 5 minutes, just totally berating us. And then he was talking to Mayavad philosophy to his daughter, and he said, see, they try to say something about religion, but actually, you see that street sign over there? It's the same as you and me and the same as God, and we're all the same. And he was going on like that. And we just stood there and didn't say anything. And after a while, he noticed that we weren't responding and getting in an argument. he suddenly took the book back from me and gave me $5, and then he handed the book to his daughter and said, "Here, you can read this." And that actually happened. So we don't know what's going to happen, but when we find ourselves in a place where it's making people's venom increase in talking, then generally Bhagavatam says we should be upeksha and not engage with them. Okay, really the last one. Mukharvind.
I just wanted to have gratefulness to you, Guru Ma, for such a amazing reading to hold for last 19 days. It was really like a spiritual word you can descend, and there is one verse that says like how the Puranas are like Vedas are not, I think in Tattva Sandarbha it says like how the Puranas are more important in this Kali Yuga than the Vedas. And I was thinking that even Puranas we have good, but the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is it is much more important to even, I don't want to compare, but like I can see that I can relate more with the and learn much more through going through the description and pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's so important for especially in people of Kali Yuga to get this knowledge of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I was just appreciating that. And two people I wanted to also acknowledge. One is His Grace Chakdola Prabhu. He did so much for the accommodation of the devotees. So many of the devotees could stay very comfortably. He took a very gone to arrange the proper accommodation. And also we like to acknowledge His Grace Ramananda Saka Prabhu, Shraddha Mataji, Sri Antriksh Prabhu and Apar Gaurangi Mataji. They were like a mad scientist. I am in their WhatsApp group. It's like thousands of messages. If we really count, it's more than 10,000, I will say, from the last 1 month. And though they are not here physically, but I think they are much more than anyone. I feel that their consciousness absorbs. I want to bring them in the assembly here in the Govardhana and have prayers for them for their service that they did for making this.
Sadhu, sadhu. Mukharvind, I couldn't imagine having one of these readings without you here. And for those who don't know, Mukharvinda, well, it was touch and go because the laws changed about visas and stuff. He thought he couldn't come. Then he decided he could come. And then I found out he flew all the way over here, and then he had to work too. So he'd be here during the day, and then at night he has a laptop open and he was working all night. And when he first got here, he was throwing in a full parikram on top of everything until it became like almost impossible. But thank you very much for your great enthusiasm. You've really lifted up the Sangha. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Sri Panchatattva, if you so desire, please help transform our hearts and minds to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead and know that He is the fountainhead of all rasas, all loving relationships, and He's the source of everything. And please let us expand that conception to the world as your personal missionaries. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaura Haribo. 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Nitai Gaura Haribo. Haribo. Haribol. Nitai Gaura Haribo. Vanchakalpatarishya kripasindabhevacha patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Lunch should be any time now. What time would you like to come back? What time? We have one suggestion for 3 o'clock. We have another suggestion for 4 o'clock. I just want to make sure we finish.
3 for good measure.
1:30? What?
3 for good measure.
3.
I think.
Any votes? Okay, let's take a vote. A show of hands. First we're going to say 3 and then we're going to say 4. Who would like to come back here at 3? Who would like to come back here at 4? Okay, inside. Who would like to come back here at 3? Who would like to come back at 4? Who wants to come back at 2? Gopinath? Gopinath wants to come back at 2. 3 won by a long shot. So we'll see you at 3:15. Hare Krishna.